Junior Cycle History students, let's chat about the causes of the American Revolution. The Navigation Acts were a series of acts that stated American products like sugar, tobacco and cotton could only be sold through England, so England was acting as a middleman. This meant increased wealth for England and very little effort on their part. These laws led to widespread smuggling by the Americans and consequently clashes with the English. During the 7 Years' War, Britain and Americans combined to fight the French, who had colonies in Canada and America. War was incredibly expensive and it increased British national debt. Americans were taxed to cover the cost of the fighting. One of the most significant causes was undoubtedly the taxation that Americans were forced to pay. The Quartering Act meant that local towns and villages had to provide housing and food for any British soldiers that were stationed there. The Sugar Act saw a tax being placed on sugar imports. Because of the Stamp Act, Americans had to pay for newspapers and legal documents to be stamped by government officials. A group called the Sons of Liberty organised the burning of these stamps, and many stamp officials were attacked. Many Americans or colonists believed that there should be no taxation without representation. So this meant they didn't think they should be taxed when they didn't have anybody to represent them in Parliament in England. The Boston Massacre was also a significant cause of the American Revolution. American protesters, who were called patriots, were protesting against taxes on imported goods like tea. The protesters shouted and threw snowballs at English soldiers. The English soldiers then opened fire and killed 5 people. And the final cause that we're going to look at is the Boston Tea Party. So the British government allowed the East India Company, who were an English company, to sell tea directly to the Americans without tax. American tea importers, however, had to pay tax, and this led to further protests. In December of 1773, colonists dressed up as Native Americans and dumped 342 crates of tea from British ships into Boston Harbour. This was called the Boston Tea Party. The British government imposed the Intolerable Acts on Boston as a result. For example, Boston Port was closed until the East India Company had been repaid for the lost tea.